Oh, hell no. That's crazy.
It's not like a
No, no, no.
straight.
Yes. That thing's, that's a
No, there.
They saw it on the radar, too fast, too high. For a moment it didn't even look real, a return that shouldn't exist, something that didn't follow rules. And then it was already gone. That's the Blackbird. For years, Soviet air defense had been built on certainty, on structure, on repetition that always led to the same result. It was not just a network of machines, but a system of belief, reinforced over time, tested in real situations and proven under pressure. Radar stations stretched across thousands of kilometers, layered in depth, calibrated with precision to detect everything. From slow, low-flying intruders attempting to avoid detection, to high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft that once believed themselves untouchable. Interceptor squadrons remained on constant alert, engines warmed, pilots trained to respond within minutes, sometimes seconds, depending on proximity and threat level. Surface-to-air missile systems formed a dense, overlapping shield over critical regions, creating zones where intrusion was not just detected, but punished. And it worked. The downing of the American U-2 in 1960 was not just a tactical success. It was psychological confirmation. A high-altitude aircraft, designed to operate beyond reach, had been seen, tracked, engaged, and destroyed. The message echoed through every layer of command. Even the most advanced Western technology could be countered. From that moment forward, Soviet leadership operated with reinforced confidence. Their skies were not just defended, they were controlled. This belief shaped everything. Radar operators trusted their screens without hesitation. Commanders relied on predictable engagement timelines built on years of consistent performance. Pilots understood their role clearly. Once a target appeared, interception was not a question of possibility, but of execution. The system worked because every component reinforced the next. Detection led to tracking. Tracking led to engagement. Engagement led to elimination. There was order, there was control, there was certainty. And then, one day, the pattern broke. It began like any other detection. A signal appeared on radar at extreme altitude, moving fast, faster than most targets, but still within acceptable parameters. Operators marked it, began tracking, calculating trajectory, estimating speed, altitude, direction. Procedures were followed. Communication lines opened. Nothing unusual, at least not yet. Then the numbers began to change. Speed estimates climbed and kept climbing. Altitude readings pushed higher and didn't stabilize. The target didn't behave like a conventional aircraft. It didn't adjust course after detection. It didn't descend. It didn't slow down. It simply continued. Smooth, linear, uninterrupted, almost indifferent. Inside the control room, the shift was subtle. No alarms, no panic, just a growing silence. Operators recalibrated systems, adjusted frequencies, verified signal integrity. Another station confirmed the same readings. Then another. The data matched, which made it worse, because now the anomaly wasn't in the system. It was real, and it was moving through their airspace. Command was alerted. Interceptors were scrambled immediately. Pilots accelerated down runways, lifting into the sky, climbing aggressively toward projected intercept points. On the ground, missile systems locked onto the target, feeding real-time data into guidance computers. Everything was unfolding exactly as designed. Detection, tracking, response. But something fundamental had already shifted. Time. By the time interceptors reached altitude, the target had already moved beyond predicted positions. Adjustments were made, new vectors calculated, pilots pushed their aircraft harder, engines straining, climbing higher, faster. But the distance didn't close, it expanded. The geometry of interception, something deeply understood, deeply trusted, no longer applied. Every calculation lagged behind reality. Every response arrived too late. Missiles were launched. On radar, they surged upward, accelerating rapidly toward the target. For a moment, everything looked familiar. This was the sequence they had trained for. Detection, lock, launch, interception. But then, the gap appeared. The target was too fast, too high. The missile's closing speed wasn't enough. Guidance systems struggled to maintain lock as the engagement envelope stretched beyond optimal limits. Seconds passed. The missile detonated far behind. Another launch followed. Same sequence, same result, another same result, again and again and again. Each attempt repeated the same pattern. No variation, no improvement, no success. Operators watched their systems function exactly as intended and still fail completely. There was no malfunction, no error, only limitation. Pilots reported visual contact, but only briefly. A distant dark shape, cutting across the upper atmosphere at a speed that made pursuit meaningless. There was no opportunity to engage, no moment where skill could compensate for distance. Even at maximum performance, their aircraft remained far below, far behind. There was no fight, only observation. And slowly, something began to change. Not in the machines, in the understanding. Because this was no longer a problem that could be solved with adjustments. It wasn't about faster response times or better coordination. The system itself was being tested, and it was failing in a consistent, repeatable way. And repetition creates realization. More detections followed. Different sectors, different days, same outcome. The object would appear, cross-monitored airspace, and disappear. Interceptors would launch, missiles would fire. Nothing would change. The pattern became predictable, and predictable failure is something no defense system is designed to accept. The aircraft responsible for this disruption had been created years earlier in response to a very specific problem. After the U-2 incident, the United States understood that altitude alone was no longer enough. Survival required something more extreme, something that didn't just challenge defenses, but exceeded them entirely. At Lockheed's Skunk Works, under the leadership of Kelly Johnson, engineers were given an impossible task: build an aircraft that could not be shot down. The solution was not invisibility, it was performance pushed beyond conventional limits. The result was the SR-71 Blackbird, a reconnaissance aircraft built for one purpose: to enter hostile airspace, collect intelligence, and leave without being stopped. Its structure was made largely of titanium, because at speeds exceeding Mach 3, air friction alone would generate temperatures capable of melting conventional materials. At the leading edges, temperatures could exceed 500 degrees Celsius. Even fuel was used as a coolant, circulating through the aircraft to absorb heat before combustion. Nothing about it was standard. Even on the ground, the aircraft leaked fuel, its panels intentionally designed to expand and seal only at high temperatures during flight. Pilots joked that it looked broken before takeoff and perfect at speed. At altitude above 80,000 feet, it operated in an environment closer to space than to traditional air combat zones. The sky darkened, the horizon curved, the Earth itself seemed distant. At speed, over 3,200 kilometers per hour, it moved faster than most missiles could effectively engage. And unlike other aircraft, it could sustain that speed for extended periods, not just brief bursts. This was the difference. Sustained advantage, not temporary, not situational, constant. Pilots who flew the SR-71 often described it as something beyond conventional aviation. Wearing pressure suits similar to astronauts, they operated in conditions where a single mistake could be fatal. Navigation had to be rethought. At those speeds, traditional visual references, roads, rivers, cities, became irrelevant. Entire landscapes passed beneath them in seconds. One pilot described it simply: "You don't fly the airplane, you manage it." And when threats appeared, the response was just as simple: accelerate. There are recorded accounts of missile launch warnings triggering inside the cockpit, a red light flashing indicating engagement. In most aircraft, this would initiate evasive maneuvers. In the SR-71, it meant pushing the throttle forward. Speed was defense, and it worked. Over the course of its operational life, more than 4,000 interception attempts were made against the SR-71. Missiles launched, fighters scrambled, systems engaged. None succeeded. Not one confirmed shootdown, not one forced mission abort due to interception. And back in Soviet control rooms, that reality became impossible to ignore. They could see it. Their radar systems were advanced enough to detect it, track it, calculate its trajectory with increasing precision. But detection without action is not control, it is observation. And observation, repeated without consequence, becomes something else. Acceptance. Inside command structures, the atmosphere began to shift. Confidence did not collapse overnight. It eroded slowly with each failed attempt. Because every layer of defense had been designed with one core assumption: engagement is always possible. Now that assumption was broken. There was something in their skies that could not be stopped. Something that could enter, operate, and leave without consequence. And that changes more than tactics. It changes perception. Because once you accept that one threat is beyond your reach, you begin to question everything else. What else can't be stopped? What else is already happening without your control? The SR-71 did not attack. It did not carry weapons. It did not engage in combat. It didn't need to. Its existence alone was enough, because control of airspace is not just about destroying threats. It is about certainty, about knowing that nothing moves above you without permission. The Blackbird removed that certainty. It turned radar into a witness. It turned response into repetition. It turned control into illusion. Mission after mission, the pattern held. The aircraft would appear, complete its route, gather intelligence across vast areas, sometimes over 100,000 square miles in a single hour, and exit before any effective response could occur. Entire regions, once considered secure, became exposed, not physically, psychologically. By the time the program ended in 1990, after nearly 24 years of service, the SR-71 had flown thousands of hours, completed hundreds of missions, and set records for speed and altitude that remained unmatched for decades. It had crossed continents in little more than an hour, gathered intelligence across the most heavily defended regions of the Cold War, and operated in conditions that redefined what was possible in aviation. But its greatest impact was never measured in numbers. It was measured in realization, because somewhere in radar rooms and command centers across the Soviet Union, a quiet understanding had taken hold. They could see it, they could track it, they could respond to it, but they could not stop it. And in that moment, without a single successful interception, without a single decisive engagement, the balance of control had already shifted. The skies were still there, the systems were still active, the defenses were still in place, but control was no longer absolute. If you enjoy this kind of content, like the video and subscribe. It helps more than you think and keeps this project alive.